Okay, this is lesson 5-4, part 1, and it's on sum and difference formulas. And I'm going to go kind of fast because we've already had time to write our formulas, but you're seeing the heading page. So if you need to copy things down, the heading, you can. And then here are the objectives, and you can read through that. And then, oops, this first part of the section is using sum and difference formulas. And so that is what that looks like. And then we're at this slide where we just wrote down some of these sum and difference formulas. And so they're very pattern oriented. And so hopefully you can kind of get through what those are looking like. And then I'm just going to add a blank slide and write a few things here. And I want you to, this is something I've just added the last few years. And this is for if we're adding and subtracting angles and we're dealing in radians, we want to kind of think about combinations that we would add or subtract to get things that are on our table. So I'm just going to remind you of your table of values that are 0, 30, 45, 60, and 90. And in radians, 0, pi over 6, pi over 4, pi over 3, and pi over 2. So if you want to think about combinations for, and then the rest of the table, if you want to think, we want to kind of think about how we can use these combinations to get other angles, because they're going to say, what is the cosine of, and they're just going to give you a number or something in radians in terms of pi or whatever. And so you want to have, maybe be pre-thinking about some angles that might add up to something. So if I gave you 75 as the sine, cosine, or tangent, what would you use if it was in degrees, 75 degrees? 30 plus 45. So 30 plus 45 is 75. And what you might not think about as much, but it's pi over 6 plus pi over 4. And so that's 2 pi over 12 plus 3 pi over 12, and so that's 5 pi over 12. So you might be asked, what's the sine of 5 pi over 12? And I'm telling you now, you can get the exact answer for that, okay? So that's why we're going through this. By the way, do you notice the common denominator of all those is 12? Correct? And so one thing you might want to think about is just, not necessarily adding another row, but kind of thinking about if I need to kind of manipulate these somehow, this would be 2 pi over 12, 3 pi over 12, 4 pi over 12, and 6 pi over 12. So that'll help you get those combinations. Other common combinations are 45 plus 60, which is 105 degrees, and that would be pi over 4 plus pi over 3. So 3 pi over 12 plus 4 pi over 12, which is 7 pi over 12. So again, you're going to be seeing those things. How about 15 degrees? How can I get 15 degrees? And really two different ways. 45 degrees minus 30 degrees, or what? 60 degrees minus 45 degrees. And do you agree in the end you would get the same, hopefully, well, I mean you would get the same answer. And so pi over 4 minus pi over 6. And so in 12ths, that is 3 pi over 12 minus 2 pi over 12, so that's pi over 12, and so obviously this one is also pi over 12. So I just want to give that introduction of having you be aware of and think about combinations of these angles that are on the table that can be added or subtracted to give us other things. So that will be a little less difficult. And that is really our introduction to that. And then this is where we'll be Either tomorrow after Professor Ouija comes, and so if you're not here today, on Thursday of this week, our professor from SMSU is going to come and talk to us as we go through things.